beginning, there was no author, Ivy League graduate, artist, or inspirational person. There was only a little girl from the east side of Cleveland, 79th and Quincy to be exact. Everybody called me Day Day when I was younger, which is short for my second middle name, LaDadrian. Echo Unique LaDadrian Brown is my full name. My mother added unique because she thought Echo wasn't special enough, and she really wanted me to be special. Day Day loves school, they used to say. Day Day gonna be somebody when she grow up. I was a happy child, always skipping around, trying to give somebody a hug, telling somebody that I loved them. I was a real sweetie pie, they say. And I loved school. School supplies, books, fresh pencils, notepads. I woke up excited every morning to go to school. I'd jump all over my parents who were probably passed out the night before, and I'd say, time to go to school, time to go. And all my teachers loved me. I was a teacher's pet in every single class, and many of those teachers changed my life. Like my kindergarten teacher who put me in honors in the first grade, probably shifting the trajectory of my entire life. That little girl is smart, she told my mother. She needs to be in the gifted and talented program. So I was gifted, and I was feeling good about my life, about who I was as a person, about the path that I was on. Until I figured out that there was something wrong with me. In fact, there were many things wrong with me. First of all, my hair was too nappy. It was too kinky. That's what the people around me said. They said, Day Day gonna be something when she grow up, but Day Day got that nappy hair. Day Day got that nigga hair. And so I wanted a perm. I just wanted to be beautiful. Don't we all just want to be beautiful? And I got one in the first grade. I'll never forget how proud I was of that straight hair. But that wasn't my only problem, because I also figured out that I was too dark and that my features were too African, my face too wide, my nose too big. And those things are harder to fix. So I spent hours in front of the mirror critiquing myself, tearing myself apart. What I was learning before the age of 10 is that as a little black girl in America, I was worthless, without value. The only value I ever received came from me being smart. And I learned that from the little boys around me calling me ugly or looking at me in disgust. I learned it from not having representation on TV. I learned it from being poor. In this country especially, we devalue people that live in poverty. We say it's their fault that they're poor, it's their shortcoming, instead of a systematic problem with America itself. We learn to hide our poverty out of shame. I was so ashamed to be poor. And so based on these things, I started telling myself a story about who I was. When we're young, all we have to create our identity and our self-image are the stories and perceptions that others put on top of us. How could I believe that I was worth anything else when those were the messages that I received? This is why it's so important to tell children positive messages about themselves, because those messages become their self-esteem. Those messages become their identity. They become the story that they tell about themselves inside. I even talk about this in my first book, Black Girl Unlimited. In that book, I say, nothing is more important than the stories we create inside ourselves, because it defines the path in our life. It defines eventually where we end up going. But by the time I got to Dartmouth, I was ready to leave all that behind. I wanted to remake myself, become someone of value in the world. I thought that the Ivy League would make me worthy, would make me important, someone of prominence. I imagined walking proudly across campus, debating peers about contemporary and social political issues. and reading books like Marcus Aurelius's Meditations and Malcolm X's autobiography. I imagine laying in the middle of campus and sunbathing, just like the white girls in the brochure. And then I would meet a cute boy. We would help each other survive the trials and tribulations of college with the strength of our love. It would be perfect. It would be the birth of my becoming. And everything that I had experienced in Cleveland would be a distant memory. Dartmouth, with all her Ivy League glory and prestige, would welcome me to the upper echelons of society. Or so I thought. In reality, what I was up against at Dartmouth was others' limiting beliefs about me, low expectations about Black students or students that had come from low-income backgrounds. All around me, people questioned our place at such an elite institution. And these were the days of affirmative action when they said Black students hadn't earned their spots out of merit, but had been given handouts that they didn't deserve. I saw the look in their eyes that told me that I didn't belong. I felt the energy of exclusion everywhere. I knew that the Ivy League had not welcomed me to the upper echelon of society. And so I had a choice to make. Given to the low expectations and statistics, like the one that says that 33% of first-gen students drop out within 3 years, or the one that says that 89% of low-income students never graduate at all. Give in or rise above. I became belligerent, hostile, aggressive, a fighter to protect myself from the negative forces around me. I created a new inside story. I'll show them, was what I said, over and over. I was determined, unstoppable, and it worked. I graduated with a good GPA and an Ivy League degree. I believe it's critical when you're advancing to a new place, to a different level, that you learn to tell yourself a different story. That's the only real power we have in creating our lives, is what story we are telling inside. Because again, that story will create a new identity, new possibilities for what you can be in this world. I wonder how many of those students that dropped out were telling themselves, maybe they're right. Maybe I can't do it. Maybe I'm not going to make it. I wonder what stories they were telling themselves. My next big shift in identity would come 6 or 7 years later after graduating. I was majorly depressed in those years because I was on the wrong path and I still hadn't dealt with the childhood trauma that I had lived through. I was working as an investigator, investigating the New York City Police Department. That was my first job out of college. It was an intense, soul-sucking job, but I was bright-eyed, 23, and determined to make my mark. I saw myself as like a Black Olivia Benson from SVU, righteous and indignant. I would march into those interview rooms with my case file folder, my hair pulled up into a tiny ponytail, and I would begin my questioning. Officer, did you ever hit, kick, or punch my client? Officer, did you strip search my client in the middle of Flatbush Avenue and 3rd Street? I wanted justice. I wanted to use my power to right the wrongs of the world. I poured my heart and soul into those investigations, only to discover that nothing really happened as a result. It was a farce. Maybe an officer would lose a vacation day. Maybe he would get a formal warning. But that was it. There were no real consequences. The organization was all bark and no bite. I became more jaded, disillusioned, and even more depressed. I would wake up and not want to get out of bed in the morning. I would have thoughts about how worthless I am, or I was. Nobody cares about me. My life sucks. Maybe I shouldn't be here. maybe it won't matter if I'm not here. I felt like I didn't have anything to live for. All those accomplishments didn't matter. There was this black cloud hanging over me, and I was lost in the world. Spirituality brought me back home. I started meditating, doing yoga, studying ancient traditions like shamanism and tantra, trying to understand something about the ways of the world. I took creative expression classes to awaken my creativity. And what I discovered through all of that spiritual work is I was not who I thought I was. I thought I wasn't creative at all. I thought I was just an intellectual. I was living inside a reality based on what others told me I should do. They told me I needed to save the world, and I tried. They told me that the only thing that mattered here was money, so I tried to get rich or die trying. They told me you'll never make it as an artist, so I didn't even pursue it. I did all the things they told me to do, but I wasn't happy. I was dying inside. I knew I was on the wrong path, headed in the wrong direction, that this was not the life for me. And so I became reckless. I rebelled. I quit my job and moved to California with $100 to my name. And it was the best decision I could have made. Because the new me, the one that was trying to emerge, was in California. I became an artist, my true calling. Even though I had never done anything artistic in my life, I knew it's what I was supposed to do. I'm an artist, I started telling myself, creating a new story, a new identity. I wrote a one-woman show that was mostly sold out for the duration of its 3-year run. I came out of nowhere. I got a standing ovation almost every single night. It was healing and cathartic, and not just for me, but for other survivors of sexual abuse, which I talk about in the show. Together, we bore witness to each other's pain, and I felt like I had finally arrived. I was no longer Echo Brown, intellectual activist, world saver, no. I was Echo Brown, the artist, the sensitive soul with a story to tell. This was the biggest shift that I had made in my life because it required me to let go of everything I previously believed about myself. It required me to remake myself in ways that I hadn't imagined. After that, opportunities came on their own. Producers from LA, a book deal from Macmillan, then Paris, the city of lights. When you get on the right path, things just come to you, in my experience. In Paris, I didn't just write my first book. I did some of the most healing work that I've ever done in my life. I started working with an EMDR therapist, excavating the skeletons of my past, confronting some of the hardest moments of my childhood, finally resolving them. I discovered what it was like to not be depressed for the first time in my life. It was joy, freedom, lightness of being. I was more happy than I've ever been. I was healed. It was miraculous, life-altering. I skipped around the streets of Paris in glee. And then my kidneys failed. And my baby brother died of a fentanyl overdose at 30. The last thing he said to us is, "I love y'all, but I don't love myself." Drug addiction has plagued my family. My mother was addicted to crack for many years. My father is an alcoholic. My other brother is currently locked up after spiraling with a series of drug addictions and alcohol. It runs in my family. All addiction is really just an attempt to outrun the pain. And there's been so much pain and sadness in my family. My brother thought nobody loved him. He thought nobody cared about him. And over 100 people showed up at his funeral. If he were still here, I would tell him that there wasn't a day, there wasn't a moment, there wasn't a second, not one second, that we didn't love you. And 2 months after he died, 2 days after France went into lockdown, I started to feel unwell. My body felt heavy, weighted, like I couldn't lift myself up. I thought I was having a lupus flare, which is an autoimmune disease I've had since 2013. I thought it would pass, but it got worse. I started throwing up. I was dizzy, disoriented, confused. I couldn't even walk to the kitchen to feed my sweet cat, Baba Baby. I crawled around my apartment like a wounded animal to the bathroom, to the kitchen. I couldn't understand it. How could the happiest time of my life be followed by this? What had I done to deserve this? My faith was shattered. I was broken. And for the first time in my life, I was without my strength. And who was I without strength, without sense of purpose? I worked hard my entire life, and now I was dying alone in a small apartment in Paris. I felt like I was being called home, like this was the end of me. And I thought about my parents constantly, about everything that we had overcome together. We had made it all the way from that one-bedroom apartment on the east side of Cleveland. I didn't even tell them that I was sick because I didn't want them to worry. And my mother was beside herself when she found out that I nearly died. How could God try to take 2 of her children in 1 year? When I was diagnosed with end-stage kidney failure and I began dialysis, I did the only thing that I could think of to do and the thing that I said I would never do. I moved home to Cleveland. I will never forget the look in my parents' eyes when I walked up that driveway. Something between deep gratitude and unconditional love. It was like I never left. Day home, my mother said. She done come back. Only home can make you feel like that. The same and reborn all at the same time. Now a new journey begins for me. And perhaps the most challenging of my life. And I don't know if I will survive this. I want to be honest about that. I don't know. My survival depends on somebody else giving me a part of their body, which is crazy to me, wild to think about. It also depends on me telling myself a new story about who I am and what I can overcome. In the past, I believed I was special. I thought I was superhuman for everything, for all the obstacles that I managed to defeat. And what I've learned in this journey is just how human and fragile I am, and that nothing is promised, not even tomorrow. I wrestle daily with bitterness, victimhood. Why me? I want to curl up and concede my defeat. I have been defeated. But I choose instead to tell myself a different story. You will walk to the other side of this, I say. You will get through this. You will rise again. I have to tell myself this story because my survival depends on it. I want to leave you with these words by Shannon Alder, which I believe perfectly encapsulates what it's like to go through the trials and tribulations of being human, to constantly have to remake yourself, create new identities. She says, "You are not bound by the past. That is who you used to be. You are reminded that your feelings are not who you are, but how you felt at that moment. Your bad choices defined you yesterday, but they are not who you are today. Your future doesn't have to travel the same path with the same people. You can start over at any moment. You don't have to apologize to people that won't listen. And you don't have to tolerate the people that won't apologize when they hurt you. You don't have to justify your feelings or actions during a difficult time in your life. All you have to do is walk forward with a positive outlook and trust that God has a plan that is greater than the sorrow you left behind. The people of quality that were meant to be in your life, you won't need to explain the beauty of your heart to them. They already understand what it's like to be human. A roller coaster ride of emotions during rainstorms and sunshine, sprinkled with moments when you can almost touch the stars. May your journey be long and gorgeous. May your moments be joyful and expansive. May the storms pass quickly, and may you learn to tell yourself a new story, one brimming with hope and possibility, especially on your darkest night. May you rise again. Thank you.
We are on stage live with Echo Brown. Echo, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. When I first spoke with you, you were actually in Paris.
This is true, yes.
Yes, so a lot has changed since that time. So, how does it feel to be back in Cleveland?
You know, it's very strange, and it's strange because I'm not really living a full life here. I'm just going to dialysis and, concerned about my health, and I don't really have friends here. So I'm constantly like trying to, get the dialysis techs to be my friend.
Okay.
So it's not quite the same kind of full life that I'm used to living in all the different places that I've lived. And just, getting used to that.
Okay. So how was it? What was your childhood like growing up in Cleveland? I know you talk about it in your book, but tell us a little bit how about your childhood.
Yeah, so growing up in Cleveland was no walk in the park.
Okay.
It was very difficult. It was, for a long time, once I left Cleveland, I said I would never come back because I was so scarred by it. So most of like my memories here from childhood are all of trauma or the difficult things. And there were some good things that happened too, but of course we tend to remember the difficult things a
Absolutely.
lot more because it really gets into our mind and into our brain. Um, but now, being here with my parents, it's nothing like it. Like we're making new memories, we're making more
Good.
happy memories. So at least I will have that to erase some of the negativity from before.
That's really good.
Yeah.
So tell us, what would you say to local youth here from Cleveland? I mean, you moved all the way to Paris. You started a one woman show. You know, you have actually done some unimaginable things. Great accomplishments, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Um, what would you say to students here that may want to move across the country and may not even think it's possible?
Yeah, so the biggest piece of advice I have for students, but for anybody in general, is to follow this kind of inner voice. That's literally all I've done.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't come from money, so a lot of these opportunities that I was able to go and do, it didn't happen when I was rich. When I moved to California, I literally had $100 and I slept on a friend's couch. So if you wait until you get more money, or you wait until the time is right, you probably will be waiting forever. So my biggest piece of advice is, if your inner voice is telling you you need to go do this, you need to do that, even if it doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the decisions that I've made, they don't make logical sense. Like, why would you just move to Paris? You know what I mean? Um, but I knew in my heart it was right. My whole soul said, you need to go and do this. And when your whole soul says something tells you to go do something, I would listen to it, because that inner voice is connected to a field that we can't understand. Is connected to, wisdom that we are maybe not tapped into. So it already knows the way. So I would just follow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, you went to an Ivy League school, um, Dartmouth.
Yes.
Wow. You
Yeah.
graduated from John Hay High School.
Yep.
Anything is possible.
Yeah.
You talked about it a little bit in your presentation. How was that for you, the struggles?
Yeah.
How did you get through those struggles?
Yeah. So what I will say about Dartmouth is, I was very angry when I got there, and I was angry because I could not believe that everybody hadn't come from a place that I'd come from.
Okay.
I could not believe that I had been struggling my entire life, and there were people that had just been living, I mean,
Yeah.
just living, just traveling the world and had money and had access to opportunities. So I knew there was inequality in the world, but I didn't know that it was like that, you
Yeah.
know. So it was really challenging in that sense. For me, Dartmouth, once I learned the academics and I learned like kind of how to play the game, academically, it was not that challenging.
Okay.
There were some courses that were challenging, like, calculus, economics, stuff like that, just because my mind doesn't think like that. But once you learn, I think, and this applies across the board, to play the game,
Mhm.
um, then you just kind of play the game and you get yourself through it,
Okay.
Um, but for me and for my identity, I will say that going to an Ivy League school was very important because it gave me something to hold on to in terms of making myself worthy or giving myself value, which I mentioned in the presentation. I didn't feel like I had just who I was.
Mhm.
So even now, a lot of times I'll mention to people if I feel that they don't know me or something like that. I'll
Yeah.
say, oh, I went to Dartmouth, and that's to give myself value.
Yeah.
So that's how I've been using that for my own psyche, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And sometimes I would imagine that would also change up the conversation.
It does. And you
Mhm.
see the shift immediately, right? Because before people meet you, they don't know anything about you. And so they have the negative assumptions that society has given them.
Mhm.
So they're assuming maybe that you aren't intelligent or whatever those negative perceptions are.
Mhm.
So as soon as you say Dartmouth, they shift and
Yeah.
they say, oh, right. And so
Yep.
now they have to give you a different level of respect that they weren't prepared to give you, maybe as a Black woman or whatever they assumed.
Mhm.
So it's a way to sort of take and demand that respect.
Okay. Would you say, let's go back a little bit. Was this your dream school? Did you have teachers or local leaders, mentors that
Yeah.
encouraged you to go to Dartmouth? How did that come about?
Yeah, so to be totally honest, the reason I chose Dartmouth was because it was one of the early brochures I saw somewhere, and
Okay.
I really was like, wow, this looks like a pretty place. I didn't even know what the Ivy League was until I told my guidance counselor I was planning to go to Dartmouth. And he said it's better to do well at a third or fourth tier school than to flunk out of an Ivy League school.
Okay.
I said, what's an Ivy League school? Um, so I don't know that I had like dream schools per se. I've always, my whole life, I've just been kind of on this path and just kind of doing the things that feel right in my heart. And so when I visited Dartmouth, I knew immediately. I was like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to go to college. It was just like this knowing. Um, and so, yeah, again, I just kind of followed that. But I don't. I think today, because of the internet, kids are a lot more are exposed to the world and different things.
Hmm.
I didn't necessarily have that same kind of exposure, so I wouldn't say it was my dream school. But when I visited, I knew I needed to go there.
Were there times that you had doubts, times that you felt like, oh, I don't know how I'm going to get through this? How am I going to make it?
Yeah. Yes. And I think a lot of those doubts for me came with dealing with depression. I
Okay.
remember a lot of nights I sat in my dorm room alone, and I was just like, I don't, what's what's the point of me being here?
Yeah.
So a lot of my struggles came not necessarily from the challenge of college, but from the challenge of being a deeply traumatized person and trying to function in this high pressure environment. It's very hard to, if you are having suicidal thoughts or you're weighted by your past,
Hmm.
to then carve out a space in your psyche for your schoolwork.
Okay.
But that has been my gift throughout my life, right? Is that I'm dealing with all of these unbelievable things and still I'm able to focus. But at Dartmouth, that was a lot harder because I was out of my element.
Okay. Um, you talked about in the video remaking yourself.
Yes.
Um, can you tell us a little more?
Yeah, I think over and over in life, you have to constantly remake yourself. So when I was younger, I really saw myself as like this like beast, untouchable person. That was my self-image. That's what was laid upon me. If I'm going to succeed at Dartmouth, I'm going to have to create something else. I'm going to have to see myself differently because if I continue to see myself as I saw myself in Cleveland,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to be able to make it through the challenges that are being thrown at me. When I became a stage performer, I had to see myself as this kind of warrior artist person. So I think constantly in life we keep evolving, and the biggest piece of our evolution is how we see ourselves, how we connect to ourselves, and that drives the choices that we make. So that affects the entire trajectory of our life, how we are seeing ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that constantly has to evolve.
So, how is it living life as an artist?
Look, it's no walk in the park. Okay, I know if you've been to my website and you see the nice pictures, you're like, this girl, she's made it. No. um, it's a different kind of life. I will say there is a lot more freedom because I don't feel like I'm pinned, to somebody else's work or their goal.
Okay.
I get to create my own projects. I get to, constantly be in this kind of creative fire that
Mm-hmm.
was always inside of me, but really didn't become expressed until I got to California.
Mm-hmm.
So I like living in the creative fire, and I like. Michael Jackson once said that he feels like he doesn't write the songs; they just kind of come through him. He has to get it out.
Mm-hmm.
He feels like a channel. That's exactly how I feel for my creative work. In fact, sometimes when I'm on stage, I'll start swaying because it's literally like I'm channeling the energy of the audience.
Okay.
The same thing with the book. I will not write a sentence until I feel the channel coming through.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So, speaking of the book, did you see yourself becoming an author?
Not at all.
So, how did that come about?
I always thought that I might write a memoir,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't think I would write this kind of book ever. Like with magic and memoir, this is totally different for me. After I finished my show in California, I'd been running that show for like 3 years. I actually was trying to get to LA. So I was desperate for like this kind of like fame and like I wanted my name in the lights.
Mm-hmm.
And all these big producers from LA had come up, and I thought I had made it. I thought this was my big break. And then they just disappeared,
Hmm.
right? And that's show business. You may have a little bit of heat one day, and then it's just gone. And so I was left, trying to pick up the pieces of my life, trying to think about what I would do next. And I literally got a call out of the blue from this young editor at Macmillan, and she was like, "Oh, do you want to write a book?" I was like, "What's lady talking about? I'm trying to get to LA."
Yeah.
And I didn't have anything else, so I took that opportunity, and it totally changed my whole life. And it's given me this new calling that I didn't even know that I had.
Mm-hmm.
Who knew I would become a children's book author? And yet, what more noble calling is there? Right?
Absolutely.
Because you're influencing the minds of the next generation,
Mm-hmm.
and you plant all these seeds and you don't know how these seeds will sprout. So that's how I got on this path.
Can you talk a little bit about magical realism and how you incorporate truth into fiction?
Yeah, so I think that the magic is very important in my work because it opens this other dimension, this kind of spiritual dimension that you can't see,
Mm-hmm.
but is felt, I think, in daily life, whether you recognize it or not. We all, well, I won't speak for everybody, but for myself, I feel like there are these bigger forces that kind of drive my life. And so it was important to try to capitalize on that in the book. And just in terms of what my parents have been able to overcome, they are magic to me. I mean, my
Absolutely.
father, my stepfather who raised me, he's been stabbed in the heart, he's been run over twice.
Oh wow.
You know, like he's been through so many different things. He's
Hmm.
so tough.
Hmm.
And so there is this kind of degree of magic that's always been in my life. And so I needed to add that dimension. And there are things in the human experience that happen to us that you cannot explain just by regular words,
Hmm.
just with reality. So that's where the magic becomes useful.
Very nice. When I first reached out to you, as I mentioned, you were in Paris,
Mm-hmm.
and you had explained to me your health situation.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I reach out to authors, or not just authors, presenters in general, everyone is very busy, right? And so sometimes it may take some time to get a response, but you were very prompt.
Mm.
And so when I did not hear from you, and I said to myself, well, this isn't like her.
Mm.
And I emailed you back and I said, I hope everything is okay. I hope all is well. I look forward to hearing from you. And when you emailed me and you told me that you had almost died, I couldn't believe it.
Mm.
Talk to us a little more about that experience. I mean, you literally almost died.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It was. Even now, I get a little emotional about it. It was unbelievable, and just so unexpected. And for me, it just kind of came out of nowhere. I had just lost my brother 2 months prior to that, so I was still working through the grief of that. And so I'm sure that working through the grief of that played a role in it.
mhm,
Um, and I didn't know I was dying. I just was super sick, and I can't believe I was so naive to not know that something was really wrong. Like my
mhm,
whole body was essentially shutting down, and it
mm,
got to the point where I actually could not walk to the kitchen. And what I can tell you is that experience reset my whole life. So we
mhm,
keep talking about remaking ourselves. And it shattered my faith and it brought me to this kind of bottom place where I was so deeply humbled. I have been so deeply humbled. And I have become so appreciative for being alive,
mhm,
which for me is ironic because I spent so much of my life wanting to die.
mm,
Now I would give anything to stay alive. And I really realized, just the power of this experience of being a living person and being in existence and everything that you can experience here. So it has totally changed my perspective. It has changed how I see myself. I lost a lot of people in my life because
mhm.
I just once you meet death, it changes who you have in your life and what you're willing to tolerate.
Absolutely.
Um, so yes, it has taught me that I'm not a superwoman or I'm not immortal. So yeah, it's just changed everything about my life and how I live and how I see myself.
So you're back here in Cleveland. You've gone through this major health experience, this major change. How has your health experiences changed your identity lately?
Um, I would say that it has also made me it's made me more of a fighter
Mm-hmm.
because of everything I've gone through with dialysis and sometimes doctors not listening to you and fighting for your quality of life, even through this kind of experience.
Mm-hmm.
It's made me a lot more fearless, more than I was before. I'm constantly fighting with the doctors and the nurses.
Yeah.
If they say no, I want to know why. I want to speak to the supervisor. I become a
Yeah.
black Karen.
Yeah. Not
Um,
a black Karen.
yeah. So it has made me, it's given me this kind of strength that I didn't know I had,
Okay.
and allowed me to kind of tap into that even more.
Hmm. So I have a couple more questions that I'm going to ask, but I do ask that our audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A box, and we can certainly get some answers for you from Echo. So as far as your work, just going back to your work, what do you want the readers to get out of your work, whether it's your
Yeah.
show and your writing?
Yeah, I think my whole purpose on the planet is to just be a representation that it can be survived. And it can be survived, you can remain whole within the surviving.
Mhm.
I spent a lot of my life believing that I was broken, I was, just not good or whatever. And what I realized is I was never broken. It was never a question of something is wrong with me. It was a question of something is wrong with society when we can do this to a person.
Mhm.
And I know that there are so many other young women, young boys out there, Black in particular, that are going through unbelievable experiences. And you internalize it and you say, oh, there's a problem with me. I'm wrong. And so, what I hope this book ultimately shows is that you are not wrong. Society is wrong. There's
Mhm.
something wrong with the way that we break people down, and then
Yeah.
they have to rebuild themselves.
Mhm.
So, what I hope people get out of this work is that not only is it survivable, but you then can become an inspiration for the next generation. You then can become a light for other people. So, I hope that, that shines through.
Do you have any new work coming out? Any new books?
I do. So even through the midst of all of this, I still finished my second book, never missed a
Good.
deadline somehow.
Awesome.
And my second book is actually about my first year at Dartmouth.
Okay.
So it's a lot lighter because there isn't as much kind of intense trauma.
Mhm.
And that comes out next January.
Is this a YA novel as well?
Yes.
Okay.
I've also written a TV pilot based on this first book.
Oh
TV is a
wow.
much longer process, but if that comes out, then there will be a TV show about all of this, and, based in Cleveland and everything like that.
Wow. Okay, that would
Yeah,
be awesome for you.
yeah,
That would be pretty big.
yeah. So we'll see. I don't know.
Okay. Um, one of the last questions, well, no, I take that back. Before I go to one of the last questions, when you talk a lot about identity, remaking yourself, did you go through any type of therapy
Oh yeah.
in Paris?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, look, I've been doing therapy basically since I got to Dartmouth. So at Dartmouth, I started seeing a counselor. She helped me a lot, but I didn't really get to the core of it. I saw a therapist when I was in New York. I saw a therapist when I was in California, but I really wasn't able to do the shift and the transformation work until I started working with an EMDR therapist in Paris.
Okay.
EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing. And it's a type of therapy that they do for people that have been really traumatized. So, like vets, childhood trauma. And I kid you not, it changed the foundation and the fabric of my life.
Wow.
Prior to doing that therapy, I had this like heavy black cloud. After I did it, I was just like a different person, and I
Mhm.
haven't been depressed since.
Hmm.
And to go through this and not fall into depression is really a testament to the power of that work. Because prior to doing that work, if this had happened, I would be in a total blackout.
That's amazing.
So it really, I mean, it totally changed my entire life. And it's again, it's called EMDR.
Okay, and thank you for explaining that because we did have a question from one of our viewers who asked, "What type of therapy
Yep.
did you go through?"
So it's yep. And basically, just to give a little background information for the person that asked that question, somehow it's a type of therapy where literally all you do is like stimulate both sides of the brain somehow, and that allows you to go very deep into your past and all these different things. So that was the process for that. I still work with that therapist sometimes. She's still based in Paris, so we do it virtually.
That's awesome. Because now a lot of people are seeing their therapist virtually. So I'm
Yeah,
happy to hear that you are still able to connect with her,
yeah,
even though she's way over in Paris.
yes,
So I have been meeting a lot of people and just hearing that they're like, you know what, I want to go and I want to move to Paris.
yeah.
What advice would you give to them?
Don't do it. Okay, number one. Okay, I'll tell you the whole. I'll keep it short, but I'll tell you the whole journey of why I ended up going to Paris. I was actually chasing a man. Okay, don't do it. I had met someone, and I was going to move to Amsterdam, and then it didn't work out, so I ended up moving to Paris. And everybody has this kind of perception of Paris that it's beautiful and oh my God, and it is. Paris is the city of lights. But when I tell you it's one of the most difficult places
Hmm.
I have ever lived in my life, it's like living in New York, where you have all these people. They're very aggressive. They're French, so you don't know what people are saying half the time. And getting an apartment is difficult. Getting a bank account is difficult because
Wow.
of the French administration and how difficult they make the process.
Hmm.
Getting your visa renewed is difficult. Everything is difficult.
Okay.
And plus, French people are known, at least in Paris, for being very kind of aggressive and pessimistic. So everything is terrible,
Okay.
So it was the most difficult place I have ever lived.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Okay, see, I told you guys
Yeah.
she was very
Yeah.
authentic. She was going to keep it real. So just take what she said into consideration.
Yes. Nice to visit, but very, very difficult to live.
Well, before we end, I want to ask you, and what can we share with our viewers about being an organ donor, organ donation, and
Yeah.
and talk about how is something that now you are in need of.
Yeah, so I think in the Black community, especially, we are a lot when it comes to like mass medical things, vaccines, or whatever. We're a lot more skeptical, and that's because of the history of the United States
Hmm.
experimenting on us and all these different things. I've always been an organ donor on my ID, so if I were to pass away, if I have any good organs left, then they will be donated. And I think it's something that if you feel called to, you should do. So
Hmm.
not if you feel pressured or you feel, it's not right for you, but if you feel called to it, it is obviously saving a life, and it is just this tremendous gift that you give to somebody else to ensure that, they're able to go on. So yeah, there's a lot of information out there about it. Kidney donation is actually one of the biggest, or I think it is the biggest donation that happens. I don't know why the kidneys fail so easily, but there's a ton of people on the list. There's a ton of people that can't be on the list for health reasons, so they will be on dialysis for the rest of their life.
Hmm.
But yeah, there's a lot of information out there if that's something that you're interested in. And also on my website, I have some information, echobrown.com.
Thank you for sharing your website. One last thing, I just want to give you the floor. If there's anything you want to say to our viewers or share with our youth, I am hoping that we are able to record this video
Yeah.
so we can share this. But if not, no worries, because Echo and I have become good friends. So I will be more than happy to reach out to her and ask her to come back to the library, especially hopefully things will start to open up.
Mm.
And because usually we are here in our auditorium, it's usually packed with kids. So we are missing all of our patrons and our youth as well. So anything you want to share with them?
I guess the only thing I feel like I've shared everything, but the last thing that I'll share is if you feel like you have a story to tell, or you have, you are an artist, or there's some piece of you that feels creative or feels like you need to pursue creative expression, to not ignore that and to not suppress it, because I suppressed it for a long time in my life to my own detriment. So if you feel that kind of creative fire, to pursue it and see where it goes.
Awesome. Well, Echo, thank you so much for joining us. Everyone, we want to thank you for joining us as well. Our online viewers, if you stay on for just 1 or 2 more minutes, what I'm going to do is put the link in the chat. We are giving away free books, free copies of Black Girl Unlimited to all of the students who viewed into our broadcast today. So if you just give me 1 to 2 minutes, I will add that in the chat. And again, we want to thank you for joining us today.